Rio de Janeiro in 2018. Welcome, Ofri.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I guess I'm going to read quite a bit, which is a surprise to me. But it will be a presentation that maybe will include my many hats. So part of it is almost like a lecture performance, and we'll see some videos, but which are my work, but others will be a little bit more kind of academic and abstract somehow. So let's hope all those hats will hold. Start with sound will be amazing. Let's go back. It was when we tested it. Mm-hmm.
E eu fui fazer a prova e eu lembro da primeira vez que eu fui no parque. Era saltando ali em São Cristóvão, entrando na Quinta da Boa Vista. E tem aquele riozinho, né, que corta o parque, em volta do parque, aquela lagoa. E tinha uma água esverdeada, assim. E eu olhava para tudo aquilo. Eu lembro que eu vi uns patinhos, umas crianças brincando. Eu achava tão bonito. E aí eu subi as escadas e me deparei com o museu.
I have not been able to see it again after the fire, in fact. It's too cruel. But I'll do it for you. So, let's go. Oh, there. No, to the left. Or to the right. I'm not sure from what point of view you are.
A Quinta da Boa Vista, durante um grande tempo, foi ponto de prostituição, ponto de tráfico. Era praticamente abandonada, assim. Então tinha muita violência dentro do Museu Nacional, tinha ponto de prostituição logo na frente ali da fachada do museu. E por estar no dia a dia, sempre os porteiros, os vigilantes permitiam que as prostitutas, os cafetões, ou seja lá quem for, os traficantes ficavam por ali, usassem os banheiros, bebessem uma água, podiam falar. Eles só não se envolviam na questão do dia a dia, mas eles sempre conviveram com eles.
This story begins with an error. In 6 short hours in September 2018, a fatal fire brought to an end 2 centuries worth of treasures in Brazil Museum Nacional. Only a handful of artifacts of the 20 million items in these collections survived this colossal disaster. Just to orient you, the British Museum has 8 million in the collection. It's a mammoth collection. An image of a nation, its many lands and its cultures. This immense encyclopedic museum included priceless of pre-Columbian and Indo-American cultures. The oldest human remains, Luzia, that ever found in Brazil. But it also had a major collection of dinosaurs. It was a material cultures and an archive and a national history museum and like thousands of butterflies from the Amazons and anthropods. 3,500 years old mummy that was buried seated position and stayed like that until 3 years ago. But also a major lingual archive that included recording and digital recording of many indigenous languages. Quite few of them are no longer in practice or in practice. This event was described as the lobotomy in Brazilian memory. A meteorite that hit Earth in 1785 survived the fire, no problem. Pedra de Bendigo traveled from space to Brazilian region of Bahia when it rested still underground for several thousand years. An irregular mass, 5,360 kilograms of iron covered by 10 centimeters layer of oxidation. It has numerous depression of its surface and cylinder-like hole parallel to its greater length. Part of its lower portion was lost during landing and left a smooth surface on one face. Beside ions, the meteorite also consists nickel, cobalt, phosphorus, and traces of sulfur and carbon in much smaller quantities. Ever since it came into contact with the human eye, the iron has been on the move again. A boy, Domingo de Mota Betelo, was grazing cattle on the farm near what it was as the town of Monte Santo, where it first spotted it. Considering the slow movement of people and commerce, the news of the finding spread quickly. In 1785, Governor D. Rodriguez Menezes arranged for the meteorite to be transported to the city of Salvador. However, the weight was so massive, the transportation just didn't materialize. The cart it was on placed and lost control, and the meteorite fell into a dry steam bed only 180 meters from the spot it was originally found. The meteorite did not travel with the people, but the people started to visit Bendigo. The London Society Academy of Royal Academy published Monet drawing of the meteorite in its periodical, and the first reproduction of the metal rock started to orbit the visual sphere. 70 years later, the meteorite was lifted and rolled to the National Museum of Brazil and stopped right by the door. First room passed by the armed personnel and the metal turnstiles. It rested on the pedestal for 130 years. Always the first one to see, the first image to take. And the fire happened. No major damage. Still, first room behind the metal turnstiles, all covered with ashes from burned neighboring objects. Images were uploaded and downloaded. Links were shared. Posts were posted. Pictures transmitted up towards space and fell down to Brazilian earth. What are the means which the earth sees? After the ashes and images rested, I clicked on the link and entered the museum again. I passed the two blurry-faced armed personnel and glided through the metal turnstiles. On my way to the staircase, I dragged my cursor up and around Bendigo, smearing glitches with depression of cylinder-shaped halls, forming geodigital irregular mass of image matter. So today we speak a little bit about storage. What remains when collection lost? It feels almost unimaginable that so many valuable objects were simply wiped, from Earth without leaving any digital trace. And one would hope that in the age of algorithmic reproduction, everything is backed up all the time. The ratio of survival will be just slightly better than the Library of Alexandria. But while we oftentimes need to fight for the right to be forgotten, it seems like this case that the technical practices of both saving and deleting is still pretty much entangled with the geopolitical and the biases and the right to be remembered. So what is really, really kind of interesting in this project and got me into look at the specific stories that pretty much nothing survived. The museum had no budget to do like a proper digitization, and almost none of it survived in the digital realm. What survived is this, a handful of 3D objects, models of different objects, scattered between different, studios and institutions. Today there are actually quite few more. And then in the night of the fire took 6 hours simply because there were no running water in the fire hydrant. As I like to think about it, that for modern water, dry became a condition and fire was really the method. So people were standing there waiting for the water to be pulled from actually the lake down the hill. And students, because it's part of the university, students were standing there and initiated this Wikimedia campaign that started locally and the day after went globally, that asked from people to contribute every image they ever took, every selfie in the museum that usually Wikipedia take off, every image of their kids, of their cats, every blaring image, everything. And people started to upload images. There were a few thousand images that for a while, and this will be kind of our interest today, were very, very ghostly and sporadic, but as institutions behave and things, even the campaign being now ordered and, boxed and got some titles and narrations. But it brought this kind of unbelievable collection that is completely user-generated. And the third one, as I think I already suggested, is a virtual tour product of Google Art and Culture. These became very popular during the pandemic. You can visit the Louvre without being there. But this was produced before, and as I don't know if you look ever into that, but these are very, very limited. It's not like you actually see the entire museum, but this is a product of Google produced by the same machine that is portraying your streets and every other site around the world. It's based on a technology that was developed by a CIA originally. It sits on servers that belong to a company that is written in California. And you can actually visit the no longer existing museum, which is kind of twisted, but it has a very, very loose connection to a national museum, to an institution. And I think once it started kind of to be very interesting, because in absence of any systematic digitization effort of the museum, all those fragment collections that remains, they are kind of challenging what we know about fixed taxonomies and epistemic framework of, that usually originally in a museum like that was designed by the state. And provide maybe in kind of an invitation to look at, at other way that systems are intermingled and refuse canonic institutions. So I would like to take those, those remains and to think with them as, I would say, almost three forms of recording or maybe documenting the institutions. So the first one, maybe going with this, will be user-generated documentation system that represents the institution as it's holding only via the eyes of the museum visitors. Images from the collection that captured by visitors are stored on their personal devices and cloud services and shared only via social media. They are portal to much other data that have been slowly aggregating. Other images those people saw, text they read, location they checked in at, and personal library organized by their own geolocation and facial recognition softwares, social network, and other data points. So in their own digital entity, those images are kind of have one set of relations. When they travel to the museum, they kind of form a different network of relations, but they're never separated from the individual source that kind of fed them. The second one is obviously a large-scale, semi-automated digitization system that develops, as I mentioned before, by mega corporation, and it reflects on the collection as they advance by ubiquitous computation, a new form of algorithmic governmentality. And the third one is a project that I'm working on called Leaking Lands. It was interesting that Sebastian spoke about leaks before, because kind of it's the way maybe I'm entering to this post-indexed entity that is now the museum, used to be a museum. So Leaking Lands is a video that is kind of take the digital remains as a site of intervention. So all those are kind of entry point to start and engage with the museum. Here I take artistic and speculative approach towards the event. And by engaging with performance practices, I'm trying to think about new species of spaces that emerge from this current techno-political environment where objects melt into ether and clouds materialize as institutional infrastructure, where boundaries between experts, users, non-human cognitions keep disintegrating and redefined, and where vertical institution hierarchies and horizontal networks entangle into a new political mesh. So museums, never be natural, and they're not starting to be natural when we are moving into a state of algorithmic governance, right? So I'm kind of thinking, I'm thinking, about this kind of three remains or three mode of documentation as part of much bigger shifts or three shifts. One is a shift from visitor to user, and maybe this is extension again of Sebastian's discussion about usership. But when we think about the visitor, especially of a national museum, so a citizen, and it's a shift into an entity of a user, we speak also about, citizens have a lot of rights like the rights for industrial strike, or the, and other rights, where users are oftentimes limited to terms and conditions and agreements of usership between a corporation and the individual, and maybe this very, very moment that Simon She called the moment of publication, that moment that used to be a unified state of body and space when an individual, a subject, is exposed to an object, and obviously the viewing subject is supposed to go through some subjectivation and all what we all learn. But if we think about this moment of publication now, this is maybe less of a moment of experience and much more of a moment of disexperience. And when I come and see Starry Night, I actually see, the new Annika Yee commission at Tate. I've seen it in social media gazillions of times before I've been there. And when I've been there, I'm documenting it, but I'm also broadcasting it to the world. And we are looking at some kind of much more fragile and longer moment of publication, that in the center of it, the body and the digital identity of the visitor operating almost as a proxy of different network, which kind of led me to another major shift. What do museums collect? So I want to propose that the second shift is from the idea of a collection, this single, this big entity of made out of objects that house in an institution and oftentimes gives it its identity. Again, in case of National Museum, it's very much an apparatus for a disciplinarian apparatus. But if we think about what museums collect today, this is also from work with my student at Tate. So Tate is actually informing you. But there are heat maps and many, many other ways that can tell where you stop and where you dwell. And actually, at the moment of, specifically in this moment of publication, we produce so much different data, different knowledge. And I want to propose that in this moment of publication, a museum today not only maintain this collection of objects, they actually maintain, taking care, produce several of different collections. Some of them are soft forms, some of them are hard forms, and those multiple collections, so it's collection of collection, and those multiple collections are oftentimes intermingled or enacted by the figure of the visitor / users. So again, this user proxy and central. And maybe another shift, which is much bigger shift, but I think is extremely interesting within the realm of museum and digital heritage, is a shift from form of colonialism, and it's and the way museum is rooted in it, to different form of data colonialism. So this is just one wing of collaboration between Tate and I think it's called In Culture, which is actually the Microsoft initiated in museum. So you do search and it matches with your social media, and you'll be shocked to see that what's called the Shrine of Dandur is matched with the Microsoft headquarters, and there are many other wonderful search results. We'll maybe go back to that a little bit later. We'll have time. So those three shifts are kind of, I would say, the seed or the much bigger landscape the state of the form of documentation I would like to show. And the first one is what I titled From Collection to Recollection. And I want to go back to this collection that I mentioned, the user-contributed collection. And if you start to look at the images, the images are so rich. They fall into the category of poor images that has the capacity to emancipate somehow. But I love these images of the white frame board and the white frame of those Amazonian butterfly that are, boxed and kept away from their kind of natural habitats. But then the lush green of the Amazonian color are kind of kind of skipping from the window and seen because of all those reflection, and maybe there is another butterfly which is seen here, which are the hand of the photographer that is reflected in the window. Or, so this is just kind of one example, but each one of them is so rich in its suggestion, and in a way is kind of, collapsing many specialities, many histories, and many stories in those compressed amateur images. Also, the file names, each one is different. This one is Malsax. But then you have Sophia and Dino, 11 or 12, or you choose. So this primary school age Sophia and her purple stuffed monkey is kind of a new protagonist of this collection, like princesses used to be, and she has like 12 or 15 images of her in the center of the collection. Who is she? Who were her parents that contributed those images? I have no idea, but since this is the only digital collection, digital images of the collection, it completely reorients the story of who tells the story, who are the protagonists, what's the center and what's the periphery of it. So maybe to say that, the analysis of the digital remains offer this ghostly collection, but they really, really allowed a sense of collection as it being viewed, understood, and mediated, not by scholars or curator, but really by the eyes of its subjects. And I would like to think about it with, I don't know if Andrea Lepaki in the recent book Singularity speaks about, in the very, very last part of the book, he speaks about about witnessing, and he kind of goes again the forensic turn, the one that everyone, especially in the art world, tend to admire, and because the forensic turn is always using, machines and proof to something that as it happened. And he pointed out how the figure of the witness, the subjective, the uncountable figure of the witness, he writes in context of performance, the one who's set in the performance and is being kind of diminished. And he called to somehow bring it back and see the figure of the witness as the one that is responsible to the afterlife of a performance or to the afterlife of the event, and the one that is, has the capacity to share, to transmit, and to maybe collectivize an experience of an event that is no longer available. So instead of he calls to understanding of audience to be reshaped from the spectator to an active witness. And Lepaki understands witnessing as a developing responsibility of caring to events after life by giving testimony. So the idea of testimony, or in this case, visual testimony, as a form of carrying to the aftermath into the future by transmitting completely subjective experience. And the user-generated images or individual account of those who visit the museum and share their own images, and they're partial, yes, they're anecdotal, they're broken, but they're also very much connected. They're connected to friends, to families, to places and spaces, but they're also connected to phone and connected to IP addresses and to portals. The images that, to know better words, emancipated through their connection to living once lived, to ancestors once occupied. They are silent images of languages once spoken. In their technical and social images, they are kind of challenge or unordering collection that operate as a kind of personal and social recollection. So there are some sort of form of live archives. And the act of bringing collection back to life in a process of, it's really a process of hands-on epistemology, that doing and undoing the collection, it actively bring into consideration the notion, the known division between live and recorded, and between what is alive and what is not. The act of recollection is an active work of fabulation and kind of producing gaps of uncertainty. And to kind of go back to Lepaki, so the act of collecting documents become an act of collective witnessing. And from here, the kind of second form of collection, but here in this time from collection to correlation, right, which is what big data is doing, collecting a lot and finding correlation. So yes, as I mentioned, Google produced this tour, but the tour is part of much bigger initiative of Google Art and Culture. I don't know how well do you know this institution, and it's a form of see some smiling of everyone who ever consider collaborating or not collaborating. So very, very simple. The deal is that museums, the ones that have budget, oftentimes do the digital collection, but then they run into a whole different challenge. We, as a museum, are not, we don't have like server farms, and we don't know how, we're not like a tech company, and how to take care, basically what to do with all the, it's gigabyte and gigabyte and terabytes of images, but also how do we make them searchable? How do we make them accessible? How do we invite other people that are not already museum goers and expand our crowd through our digital ability? So here, Google offering a service, which is what they know, they are a search company. And as you can see, these are actually very, very telling, because this is not, there is no, because of legal bounds, and they learn very well from Google Book, there is no any kind of exchange of rights. The museum, all the rights, and the logos are here, but what's on here, it's completely direct to Google. It's actually taking traffic from your website. It's not adding traffic to your website. Because when I look into, I don't know, Starry Night by Van Gogh, I would never land on the MoMA's website. I will always go here. I love the logo. We're all took some classes in art history. This logo is creating a fictional narrative or linearity from classic time into same way into today. This is a new pantheon. Do not get confused. Maybe the most criticized example was the art portrait, what I think it's called. A couple of years ago, it was one of the most, one Christmas 4 years ago, it was the most downloadable whatever app. People took, I'm sure you've done it, I've done it too. People took pictures of themselves, and then they found the image from art history that is a match. If you're fair skin like mine, you had a lot in the ocean of images, but if you're dark skinned, the chances either you find something completely different because there are not so many portraits, but also images of slaves, that, the only kind of examples. So there was really a huge kind of rage of critique on this one. Other people say that it's actually used to be trained the algorithms. They don't care about the art, and they don't care. But this is just one example. There are a few other examples from the previous years, and I'm in my interest in the story of Brazil. You would not be surprised that the collaboration that is globally, there are only 169 museums collaborating with Google Art and Culture in the entire global South. So once again, if we speak about digital colonialism, it's kind of amplified, replicated, amplified orders and hierarchies that are already kind of at the core of the problems of what we are oftentimes, think about it when we think about museum and, in the model of museum. This is the very first collaboration that I've done was with British Museum and call it the Museum of the World. I don't have time for that now, but I highly recommend you to watch this little intro because it's quite fascinating. And the third kind of entry or think of recording is under the title of Licks. So Licking Land, or Licking Lands, is a third mode of documentation. And I think about it really as a digital seance. When I take those the 3D objects, the tour and the collection, as site of interventions and site of, for a couple of months, I actually invited people caregivers of the institutions, from curators to janitors and educators, and I met with them on the Google tour, and they led me in different tours in the museums, which turned into part of this project. And in other parts, I collaborated with other artists to kind of offer a different approach to those objects. I'm going to show a little clip and then I'll tell you about it.
Skin, arms, skin, flesh, skin knowing, skin seeing, skin creature breathing. Let it be like an exorcism of the sounds and the feelings and the pain and the knowing and the stuckness and the not moving and the nodding and the holding. Let it go, let it come out, let it free itself, let the sound and the vibration allow the holding to let go. Letting the pleasure of finding all the spaces that are holding, that are held, that are not known, that are hiding, letting them come out of the hiding, letting them be free, letting the sound, let everything that wants to be spoken, be sounded out, be felt out, be breathed out.
De essa, como eu não sei como colocar, mas essa coisa de ticuna, de não visibilizar totalmente aquilo que é sagrado. Um dos primeiros lutadores do meu povo, ticuna, qual já é falecido hoje, ele dizia assim: olha, nós precisamos manter a nossa história, nós precisamos preservar o que é nosso, mas também levar para o mundo afora. O mundo precisa conhecer de fato a nossa cultura. Que, tipo, algumas plantas, ela cura, ela trata, mas também não pode sair falando em detalhes. Tem que ter muito cuidado, às vezes, diante dessas imposições, essas posições, visivelmente, pode ser entendido ou traduzido de uma forma colonial.
So I don't know if you were able to read, but at least what Jose is speaking about, what he speaks about how an indigenous, about relationship with his chikuna and how his grandma tells him that actually, they don't mind to leave the objects in the collection, and this is a form of taming the white man's heart. And they don't mind because they can make more, but never actually share all the secrets. So always, when you give an object, always keep some of the knowledge away from, never share with the museum everything you know about it. And this opacity that's being kept or secretive is a form of a shield from the kind of from a museum system. And the color, again, those are projected on different sides, and here they're all quetched together. But in the center image is a collaboration I've done with the choreographer Luciana Sugar, who's a Uruguayan, and Luciana developed this practice she called pleasure practice, which is embodied practice. She kind of trying to get back to a state of pleasure and aim to find a place in the body that is pre-lingual or pre-knowing, and coming to a place of pleasure as she understands as a place of decivilizing or growing a decolonized body, because a state of pleasure is a state that cannot be captured. The body cannot be utilized, cannot be put to work, cannot be exploited, is a place that cannot be categorized so easily. So she really think about it as a practice of healing, healing from a storage space of transgenerational trauma of colonialism. And when I asked Luciana to kind of channel her practice not through body and only through voice, and we tried to think about if I can take those found digital objects and apply apply them under the subjectify them under a methodology of movement or under a practice of pleasure. And those zoom-ins these are not real space, because when objects is being scanned, it's only being scanned from outside. So you zoom in and in and in, and you get all those grottos and all those caves. These are actually completely speculative spaces. Those are machine-imagined or machine-made spaces that work, I hope, somehow as a process of healing, because the object can no longer be looked at, which is the classic museum practice. We're looking at object, and then the object can be utilized, put to work for a specific ideology. But once you start to travel inside of it and trying to get into it, into speculative spaces that exist or non-exist in this object, the object can no longer be known or utilized, as I said, into a specific indexing or specific ideology. It melts into a performance, data, matter, space yet to be known. I don't think we have a last part about residues, but I'm not sure we have time. How are we doing? We have small residues. Okay, perfect. So this is, again, in a text you probably couldn't read, it was all about skins. And when I start to think about what survive, with the removal or withdrawal of an object, and I want to offer that once the object is being removed, what it leaves us, it's with the multiplicity of its conditions. And when we start to think what survive after the museum, so there are a few objects that are in digital forms, but there are, people who work there, and their social orders, and their everyday life, or a picture of a diorama. What is it? It's a picture, it's an owl from how do you index it? How do you order it? What's the status of it? And I would like to offer the residues as a space that is actually hyphenated between body and perform and social orders, between matters, like that's why I shared the text about the meteorite that turned into kind of a geo-digital space. So even materiality has different conditions and data that is kind of slipping in different ways. And I picked this amazing picture because back to the video, the first video, remember how this museum suffered from awful austerity for years, but it became a space of the people. People come pee. People use prostitutes, came there all the time. I mean, people all the time came to use the internet. It was one of the only free of, we spoke about third spaces. It was the only space. People came there, just to rest from the sun. So it became people, a museum of the people. And once the museum died, a lot of indigenous communities say that it's almost like a second genocide because objects are being robbed, but then it became the archive where they can meet the object, and then it's been again by institutions being completely dried and burned. But people start, I like to think about it's the social epidermis, because people start to ink, and it's been only through social media, people start to ink the museum on their body. It's called Museum on the Skin. And it's been sometimes the facade, sometimes it's an index number of a specific object, sometimes, and it's really kind of a phenomena that's going through Rio, and I found it quite amazing. So can we think of museum residues of body, data, and matter not in an object form? And I would like to think that although museum objects no longer operate within the institutional colonial order, some of their constitutions, temperaments, and affordances, like back with the meteorite, are dragged. So it's dragged like computer drag, but the original of the drag, which you remember is the dress that's being dragged and dragged after them, or dragged with them, from their original matter towards a digital information rails. Residues are never clean. They cannot be simply datafied. They refuse data shift or simple digital transfer from analog to digital or from material to immaterial forms. The residues form an ecology of leftovers that habituate in space that is always in between eras and orders. The residues don't have forms like objects. They are surplus of affects and technique and affordances that are dragged with the objects. They are active formation. The residual space carries information through transductive movement, fluid mutation, and transformation. It proposes a space that goes beyond physical digital binary. The residual information fails at being fully transformed into digital realm and not conceived as a mere transmission of coded message. There are uncertainty, but they allow access to other times, and like museum deep time or colonial time. They're speaking from the mouth of many, the living and the dead, the collectors and the collected. They can potentially represent knowledge based on continuity and transformation between, again, technical system, matter formation, and biological forms. The residues are matter that become digital through us, but we are not saving them. The active residues can save us. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Ofri. It was a very interesting presentation. Does anybody have any questions for Ofri?
At least on the subject. After this tragedy that happened with the museum, has there been any discussion about like diffusing the storage of art at all? Because here we are discussing like sharing storage.
You mean by like?
Yeah, like having some pieces here, some pieces there. So if there's something happens, then at least maybe 10% of the entire thing burns instead of all of it or something.
Yeah. I mean, first, some of it was stored somewhere else, and of course, the museum is rebuilding, which, you know, is maybe problematic by expected direction. They just kind of Viva, Museo Nacional, and building. This project, the video that I showed actually, I mean, ends with a very interesting appeal to Western Museum. I mean, I don't know exactly how much they, or how they technically spread it out, but of course that's one of the consideration. And I want to say two other things to kind of connect to what you asked. Museums that are being burned or flooded is a growing phenomenon. There are many museums, specifically in the global south, that are either, I mean, it's actually question of storage is actually very much connected to question of climate crisis. And, mainly right-wing and populate, and question of austerity. The two of them together is going to lead to more and more archives and museums that are being, I mean, their entire collection of archives is going to disappear. It's also, as we saw in the city of Akka in Palestine, Israel, also sometimes a matter of a political performance to burn museums, but there are other. So so this side is a growing concern, and I'll not in the physical archive, but there is a project, very interesting project of Wiki Commons, I don't know if, about kind of museums, I forgot the name of it, but it's kind of the state of museums that are about to die or to not survive. And yeah, I'll stop here. I want to connect it to kind of, maybe one more thing, Kathy asked before about like how I came across the question of the story of Brazil, and it's very important to say that I have no proximity, not geographical and not kind of historical to Brazil, and it's really important. Just first to say that this is a very massive example. I came into interest actually from kind of the question of like more question about museum in algorithmic terms and others, and I really do think about this museum as an entry point and not so much as a case study. There are many other excellent research that's happening about Brazil fire as a case study. From museum studies, there are we are like a tiny little communities of people who are looking at this case. I'm not looking so much about the details, but really thinking about what I think about museum mode of afterness. So kind of how can we think about museum not as the sole model of main model of organizing knowledge, organizing and indexing and display knowledge, but how can we think with the removal of the object and kind of staying with the conditions which are both physical and educational and others. So, yeah.
I just have one comment. I'm sure there's other questions, but I was struck by the fact that with this removal, with this extreme sort of change that you describe, that is, the fact of this fire, there is in the void, there is this love and caring that is expressed through the usership, through the interaction with the visitors and the people who own the museum. And I think as a museum, like here in Trondheim, I think we think a lot about like the care and the love that we would love to have from the audience, and I don't know, it seems, it's very touching, the stories that you tell from the tattoos and from like the form of activities that come out of this radical change. But, and I'm sure that's a lot of the focus of I feel that it's a big focus of your work, but for us in reality, we wouldn't want to need to go through such a radical change in order for the public to sort of love us, you know what I mean? To show the love or to feel that there is a need to love something like that. I guess in the merger that we're going through with this museum, we do feel there's some reactions that lean toward that. This love, it may be sometimes in the form of conservatism, that you want to keep things as they were.
Yeah.
But
maybe just one thought is that, I mean, this is a very, very, catastrophic event. And of course, it produces, a lot of the affective residues are very, very, very massive here. But I feel like even in terms of closing a museum, because museums are also closing down. I mean, they're not always burned like that. They are also closing down. They're being merged. And this is pretty much, everywhere. And there's the idea of lost that associate with maybe all the changes you're going, is, it holds some new potentialities, I feel like, and there's something about the community holding something together. It's memories and routines, and not finding a place to park the bike or passing it on the way to school, like how a museum or other institutions become part of the landscape or object. I mean, I think we are oftentimes very object-oriented. So even if we invite artists to intervene with collections, so artists are going and finding objects and telling the story and untelling the stories, but museum is multiple ecology. I mean, there are spatial ecologies and there are social ones, and I think this exercise that hopefully none of us will experience in that level of the withdrawal of the object, could be the building or not only specific object, it produces this kind of activation of the other networks and the other conditions, and that is what to do with them.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Does anybody have any more questions?
People hold a lot of different knowledges about that, about the thing, and there's sometimes there's a good text by Irit Rogov, who's also my mentor, and it has a very provocative name. It was in IFLAC's, the architecture part, and it's called Crossing the Camp on the Way to School. And where she speaks about, she was a guest, and it was a concentration camp, and she saw kids today crossing the camp because it was a shortcut to school. And then she takes it. I mean, again, this is a provocative example, but she thinks about this kind of speciality and kind of misuse, other use, and what's around it, and in the way and. In many ways, I think about my approach to Brazil because, again, I'm not telling the story of Brazil. I would never dare doing it. But it is a way of crossing the story to look for other affordances or other kind of conditions that are around it. And I think there's element of removing or merging or leaving a building that inviting this different crossing of the everyday that we are become almost, unavailable. We don't see them. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, now we have a little bit of a break again, and then we have the last presentation of the day by Apparatus 22. So a little break. For the last session. All right. So as the last speaker of today's public's perspective day of our seminar, we have Dragos Olea from Apparatus 22. He's going to share with us some of the projects that you have been developing together with art institutions throughout your practice. Thank you.
Okay, hello. So I'm one of the 3 members of Apparatus 22 with 2 brilliant girls, Eriko and Maria. Eriko is also my sister, so just mini introduction about us. We are coming from Bucharest and Brussels, and also we are living in between these places and also Suprainfinit, which is an utopian universe, which was very important for us to mention this, that we are in between all these realms. And I don't know, you don't see the whole thing? Yeah, I don't know how to make it. Huh? Sorry? It's okay. Anyway, so we are coming, none of us studied art. I studied economics, Eriko studied sociology, Maria studied literature, and we had, we started as a group of 4 people. Unfortunately, we lost one of us, Johanna Nemes. She had a heart attack, so she passed away. So we usually don't call ourselves necessarily as artists, but a transdisciplinary art collective, and we try, we envision ourselves more like a collective of daydreamers, of citizens of many realms, as I was mentioning a bit before, researchers, poetic activists, but also sort of failed futurologists. We are here talking about museums in the future. We try to speculate about many things in the future, through this perspective of Suprainfinit, but then also we don't pretend we know these futures. So that's why we want to have this a bit of a modest take on how we work with the future. So we said we're a failed futurologists. And starting with 2015, a major topic of research for us was Suprainfinit. We gave ourselves a long-term homework to imagine a new universe that would, make us put us in a position to think differently about the things around us. Mainly, it started from a series of this is us. It started from quite a few things. This idea of imagining a new universe, and one of them was the fact that when we lost Tiana, we thought a lot about places where we can find hope. And also how we could bring this hope in our work, but in a critical way, which is a bit of a mindfuck, because usually hope is something very, it comes, usually religion is selling you, politician is selling you hope, but in a sweet, sugary way, and we want our hope to be a bit annoying, a bit like a slap on the face. We discussed this about this idea of slapping for someone to get themselves together. So that kind of hope, it's a bit of hope with also critical reflection. And this one, for example, it was a short text we wrote about Suprainfinit, because we thought, okay, we invent a universe, but what do we do with it? We don't want to keep it just for ourselves. So at a point we wanted to start to open it, and then we've been asked to curate a residency for Académie Solitude. And we started, this was part of the call, trying to think about, a universe that maybe resembles our universe, but then there are some things that are functioning in a different way, some cracks from our realities, from our modus operandi in the world, and that could come from Suprainfinit. So it's more a sort of l'avenir, the most exciting of all possible futures. And there's no GPS, talking about maps, and so it's easy sometimes to get lost, but then also the potentialities are there in a really exciting way. So hope is the new oxygen for us. But then how does it come into the practice? Because we can make some poetry, but then also sometimes we have to to sort of even tangibilize a bit some of the things we are working on. And you'll see in the presentation there are some questions, and I would like to ask you maybe to read with us the questions, because it's important for us to maybe plant some seeds in the conversation for the next days and maybe for the future. So if you want to read with me this question, is museum future tense? Yeah, next one. Okay, no, not we'll read later some other questions. This one, we hope, yes, we hope museum is future tense, and we are all here to discuss about that. But now I'd like to introduce you a bit a very peculiar thing that we've been doing in the last 5 years, mainly giving names to art institutions. It started from our long-term interest in coining names, in coining terms, and we did before starting our art practice, which we started in 2011. Even before that, we sometimes invented names for friends that had a gallery or I don't know, like a store or something. They needed a name, and we sort of worked on it, a sort of a branding, but in a peculiar, weird way. And then we thought at a point maybe we should include this in our practice, but then it totally has to make sense to be an art practice. And one of the things that we decided to do is that these are immaterial works that came in the shape of a name. So, and shaping, in a way, the future of an organization. We thought a lot about this idea of names and how important they are to conjure a certain energy, certain ideas, and to work as a fuel for an organization. And we thought a lot also about why so many of the art institutions have such boring names. Because, you work as an art institution, but why not, using yourself as an example of having name or elements of of your identity or of the way you are unfolding into the world that could be also taught by artists or taught in a way that is much more forward thinking, let's say. And one of the things that we thought maybe this is something we could contribute is this idea of names. We call them blank auguri because we try to do something that has to do with Suprainfinit. So it has to be either like a part of the name that is totally new, or a new sort of concept that we build thinking from Suprainfinit. And I give you some examples here. The first one was Suprainfinit. When we started this universe in 2015, we had a friend in Bucharest that was starting a gallery. And she asked us for a name, and we thought a lot about, okay, what should we give her? And then just as a playful thing, we said, okay, we just invented this universe, so maybe it's good to just leave it in the world too, in the hand of someone else. We are sure that she wouldn't understand anything of the things we want to do. But then also we are curious what she would understand out of it, and how this would take shape in the place of a commercial gallery. That was a commercial gallery. In a non-commercial system, because there's no commercial gallery system, so it's more like an attempt to that. So we gave her the name of Suprainfinit, and there was a bit of confusion in the minds of many people, but then slowly it made sense. For example, because we work with this gallery, we have some works that circulate in a certain way if they come from us, from the perspective of utopian place, in a certain way if they come from the gallery, from the perspective of Suprainfinit gallery, which is something very earthly. This was the first thing. And then some other people asked us, and then the second example is this one, because of many suns. It was a commission from two collectors in Italy. They really wanted to make an artist award, and they wanted an immaterial award from us. And we said, okay, we can give you a name for this, but then this name also will shape, it's not just a name, it's never just a name, of course. It's always a sign of love, it's always something that is structuring. It's a semi-empty container, but then it's still shaped, it puts you in a certain direction. So in this case, we said, okay, we give you the title of this award, but then also we give you some conditions that you have to push things in the way you approach this idea of an artist award for young artists. So it came with quite a few conditions. I can explain maybe later because it will take too long to enter on the details. But then we ended up thinking about this idea of because of many suns, which talks a lot about suns of rays of sun as something that brings vitality and care and extra and support for a young scene, for a young artist. And then And then this is a very funny story, Triumf Familia. It's a name we did for a museum of queer culture in Bucharest. I'm also working for this structure. It's a nomadic, tentacular, something again in between Romanian realities and utopia, as a sort of museum of queer culture. And I'm working as a curator for visual arts for them. But then also they knew that we, as Apparatus 22, we work with names. And they started this initiative before I was invited to take part of it. A group of people started the initiative more as looking at a sort of anniversary of 20 years of, celebrating 20 years of decriminalization of same-sex relationship in Romania. And so it looked more, the perspective was more of an archive. And we talked a lot, I talked a lot, so sort of my part was also to reflect more about that, how that could turn into a sort of institution, even if it's maybe now it's very, how do you say, ethereal and not necessarily physical existing. And then just discussing about institutions and how this queer museum could be, queering further this idea of a museum. They asked us to Apparatus to present them a name, to propose them a name. And we ended up something that is Triumf Familia, which is almost like a double hyperbola. Amiria is a new word that we expanded from this idea of media, which was how do you say, a unit for measurement for 10,000, but then it became obsolete, and now it's used more like a sort of like media. So it's almost the capacity of being multiple to infinity, if you want. And triumph, of course, is triumph. So we wanted to look at this idea of almost like a double hyperbola, that is something luminous, growing, bigger than life, of a better queer future for such museum and in general for society. And to look at how this idea of triumph can go from very small things, even from small, from legal changes in society and acceptance, but also to think of on long term about better futures. And a promise of Cnaani, it's another example. This is from this year. We were asked by an art collective from Bratislava. They wanted to open a space, and they are called Apart. They're really brilliant, and they are in this impasse. They didn't know. There are like 5 people, and they always were fighting for quite a few months. Not fighting, but discussing a lot about the name. But nobody was happy with what they had because it didn't encapsulate it. Many things that I had in mind about this one. And then they asked us. They reached out and they asked us. A proposal, and then we proposed them this one, a promise of Cnaani. So it's this idea that we invented a new word, Cnaani. So that, it's a phenomenon, Suprainfinitic phenomena. It's a moment of transformation that happens when someone receives the hug of let's say, emancipatory ideas, utopian ideas, profound ideas, visionary ideas that make a way for change. So this is what we said, okay, you are promising this kind of moment. And they took it on board this. So it's something that is the idea of these names, it's that they are sort of ever-changing, ever-charging, never-ending. So they should work as a fuel for the organization, as something that is like, sorry, I don't find the word, Maria? Lighthouse. That, you go far, you go lost in the mist, you don't remember exactly where you started from, what was the core for you. So the names also could be also within the team, something that it gets you back to important things. But then also it's open enough for the people there within the team to put their own, extra meaning into it. And also, of course, they have to circulate in the world. So these names, they have to sort of even, have an appeal, if you want, to some people. So this idea with blank auguri, of course, for us, it's a huge responsibility because making a name for an institution, it's like public work that many people are using, immaterial work that, you don't see it, but then it circulates on the tongue of people, in the minds of people, in the hearts of people. So, of course, it's a huge responsibility, and I can tell you from our working process that usually is like 4 to 6 weeks. and it's getting always like super, getting closer to the deadline, and the stress is just like piling up because we work with like thousands of things in a few directions, and then slowly going closer to the winner. And we always, when it's a work of us like this in this blank out goodie series, we always present just one name. There's no second option. We are a bit dictatorial with this, but we know from our experience there's no second option because we always start with a brief, trying to understand, of course, the context, the dreams there, and to put something extra from us in the way, maybe something in the air that they cannot articulate, but then this is our role to be able to put that sprinkles and that things that they cannot articulate, and then also to give them a shape in the form of a name. So these are a few examples. Now we should, in January, we should sort of communicate a name that we invented for Kunsthalle Ghent. It's a brilliant place in Ghent, and they really wanted to have. We work with them in many aspects of building this institution and shaping the institution. And one of the things they wanted from us was a name from one of the spaces because they have many formats within the Kunsthalle. And we've been given the choice of a place that we could format through the name, that would format through the name that we are doing. We'll also format the programming there. So it will be something about ultra hybridity between the local, the neighborhood and the institution. But I cannot tell you about that. It's super secret. Yeah. But if you have time, you have to go on the website of Kunsthalle Ghent, and then to have the user manual, and it's really brilliant in terms of having many perspectives about, and also many voices reflecting about what this institution could be, and not just the team. So another question, if you want to read with me, it's a bit hysterical. Like this is a bit better. The colors are a bit hysterical. So who's reading with me? What is your definition of relevance in relation impact? We discuss later, but then another question.
White cubes, black boxes, gray formats, how to frame the material.
We discussed a bit earlier about these things too. Exactly, very impossible, but not impossible at all. That's the challenge, we are doing, and also you are doing as institutions. Working with this idea of collection, having many formats, and working with different temporalities. But then also it's all this conversation with about care, and we are thinking a lot about what Kati said a bit earlier about less exhibitions, longer exhibitions. But then also we are very curious about what do you think as an institution about, because that also is shrinking the possibilities and the opportunities for artists. That means how do you, on the one hand, you are working more careful within the team, with the artists that you are deciding to support, but in the same time, that means yes, less opportunities for artists. So I was curious, how do you work with that tension? Okay. I tell you another work now, about another work. We wanted to take the uniforms, but you'll see them tomorrow on us. This is a work one of our first works. And we had many dreams with it work, and finally we're getting closer to sort out some of them. It's a uniform, it's called Artist Work, it's very simple. It's a uniform we did to use as a conversation piece at openings, to open conversations about evaluation of and remuneration of artistic practice, and to talk about fair pay and practices in art world. There's a version also for curators. And it was something that it has a history, the uniform, because it's an appropriation of a drawing of an Italian futurist artist and designer called Tayat. He did a uniform that was a sort of a universal piece of clothing, no matter class, no matter gender. It was in the 20s. We really liked this idea of an utopian piece of clothing, and we wanted to give it a new life, and we added the texts, which are talking about, the two extremes of a relationship with an institution. And I got an artist fee in this exhibition, I understood artist's work. I didn't get paid for my work in this exhibition, still accepted to be part of it. Do you really think artists feed on glory? Okay. So, And then for a long time, we kept presenting this work in different contexts, either as a huge drawing with instructions, or the uniforms, or whatever, or also at openings as a conversation piece. And I have to tell you, it worked very well. We always, all had these conversations before with the institution, even more when it was the case of not having a fee, because we think it's very important for the institution to be transparent about this. And also, this is a tool, also a very good tool also for institutions to open conversation with politicians, with people in the local, whatever council, or maybe with the people in the accounting, or for whatever reason, there's maybe either not the money, either not the category of artist fee, or it's just very symbolic. So, it's a very complex conversation. But then many artists and curators wanted to have the uniform. And we thought this would be very stupid to start to sell this. So we, for a long time, tried to find money to produce these uniforms and to distribute them. And this year we succeeded to produce 200 of such uniforms. And we are distributing them with several partners in different cities. It's a pilot. And what we want to do is a gift exchange. We work a lot to gift exchange. We ask the curators and the artists that want to have the uniform to provide us with a short video answering to one of three questions. One, why do you think art or curating is work? Another one, it's why do you think art is important for society? And the third one, if they have daydreams of other structures for care beyond money. So maybe we also leave this conversation that is all about money. Of course, it's a very reality check conversation, but then maybe we can imagine some other ways of supporting beyond money. And it's really, we already distributed about 50 something, and now with a group of 11 organizations in different places in Europe, we distribute the other, I don't know, 150 of them. And I have to tell you, the videos are just amazing. The diversity in terms of reasoning, of perspectives. Now it's called the Voice of a Community, the selection of videos. And I think it works very well as, on the one hand, as an archive of voices that are talking about the realities of artistic production and curatorial production and giving some insight into that. But then also this idea of daydreams of people imagining other ways of recognizing artistic labor or curatorial labor. It's quite, quite inspiring. And fortunately, because it was a bit of reluctance from some institutions to support this project, to give money for the production. Somehow we understand, somehow no. But now it entered the trajectory. For example, in Belgium, we entered with Kunsten a trajectory that it's about fair pay, and many institutions will be part of it. And then the conversation is also very important for the work. For this work, our dream is to be totally irrelevant, to become irrelevant. So this is the dream. So, we work hard towards that. We always thought that in Norway, maybe it's one of the few places in the world where it's irrelevant. But then people told us that in some places, maybe it's necessary. But yeah, very, very short. Okay, some new questions if you want to read. Utopia. Encourage the formation. Oh my God, utopia. You see? This is painful, but it's very important. Okay, I jump to another work that is important in two different ways. These are just two examples of this work that is called All, to all the artists that work in 21st century. So it's about all the artists, We are in the how do you say, in the past of the work, because it talks about the entire century. And these are two site-specific versions in Warsaw and in Kiev. And the work, in fact, it's a sound piece with these elements that are coming from Suprainfinit. And the sound piece, it's It starts from a call. So it starts from this fictional call that about a public for a work in public space, and then one of these characters, because we have few characters in Suprainfinit, one of these characters, Crystal, is proposing a work that is a monument dedicated to all the artists that work in 21st century. So it's really bewildering proposal in terms of inclusivity that never existed before. So in fact, the work is like, whoever is interested, I can send you a link after. We tried, but it didn't work right now, to listen. There are voice memos, reflecting about the need of this monument, and it's looking critically at many aspects of how the art world works now. Art world, about economy of attention, about precarity, about the blacklist or whatever lists, about success and lack of success and relevance, and how this is interfering with the market. And so this is about the content of the work. But then also this work circulates in a different, we thought about, how do we make this work also put some of its magic into action, because this criticality, to stir up some processes of change in some institutions. So we decided to do the work in this version that, can travel without us, doesn't have to be site-specific. And then this work to circulate in a way with a string of conditions. So the price of this work, because sometimes we work in a way that it's quite critical to this idea of market, the price of this work it will always be the same, 1,111 euros. But it comes with a condition that we work with the institution that want to buy this, that we work to make some changes in the way they engage with the artists. And now we are with two institutions in this process, and it's very slow, of course, because first you have to understand better the institution, and then you have to understand, how much you can push some things. But I'm sure this, slowly, of course, we do many other things, and then we are just 3 people from Bucharest and Brussels, whatever, how much can we do? But then slowly, this will make some changes in some institutions, and hopefully this will impact in the way artists are treated, or their work is recognized, or how the institution is looking at. For example, in one of the cases, it's about creating the institution and how different artists that didn't have access before to the institution, or they're not scrutinized, or they were overlooked. Let's say now they should be part of the research more properly. This is one of the discussions with one of the institutions. Another one, which is in Belgium, it's more about trying to find different types of contracts that would be more beneficial for artists. Because if you're asked to send an invoice, we're like, fuck you, we are not a company. We don't want to be a company because you don't pay us enough to have an accountant, to have, we have to do all these jobs. We don't want to work as a company. We're not interested into that. So you also have to do, because you have the structure, you have a lawyer, you have an accountant, you have to think of a better structure for the contracts that you are giving for artists. So, this is one of the conversations. Yeah, so this work, it's on the one hand is the content of the work, this monument, that is for all the artists, no matter how good or bad they are, but, it's for the effort of being an artist in this century, but then also how it works and how we want to make some change in some institutions. Okay, ooh. Okay, have you, okay. Have you? Some of them, yeah. Some of the sanctions or some of the exhibitions. Okay.
What metaphors for future art institutions could fiction provide?
Yep, okay. Hello. Okay, so talking about inspired by, we did this work for SMAC when they had the 20th anniversary. So it was a question, if Rafael Montañez Ortiz thought of rainforest for his museum, what would be for SMAC a perfect engine for radical reimagination? So, this could work for any of you as a way to think about, what could steer that imagination, what kind of maybe quirky thing could be there in the that could make that change possible. this is another of our questions. And then I explain a bit about how we work with these questions, because you saw these pictures. They are, in fact, the biggest confetti that can fly. We tried bigger and they couldn't fly. It was a very luxurious thing that we did. First time we did this work in 2012 in Museum Quartier in Vienna. We had this money to try different papers. It was insane. We just shoot white papers in all the sizes and thickness. And then we started to do the work. So this series is called Positive Tension in the Air. And it has, in the same time, it's two things. On the one hand, it's a huge, huge celebration and moment of joy and bigger than life, and grandiose moment of joy. On the other hand, it brings a layer of critical reflection within a big group of people. That is the aim. In this case, in Museums Quartier, we've been asked to, because it was the whole programming in Mumok, in other places, in Kunsthalle Wien, it was about fashion. It was funny because we had a work in Mumok in the exhibition. We knew that we were going to be in the exhibition, and then they asked us to do something for the public space, like Museum Quartier, and we said, first, no, we didn't want it to be too present at the point, because in the first 3 years of our activity, we wanted to be a bit more understated, for us to have enough work and to build our own language. So we said no to quite a few things, but then they insisted, and we said, okay, if we do a dream, we do it. Otherwise, no, why bother? So they agreed for us to do these huge explosions 5 times, or bursts, during that time, and there were all questions about fashion and, for example, fashion design dreams.
When do they turn into
Yes. Yeah. It was this idea that we could open a river of critical consciousness within a big group of people, while also having this moment of joyous moment. And then the work evolved. Each time it has a different name, because the work it's very much a context-based work. In each case, we are doing new questions. In this case, for example, 2 of the latest one, everything is at play at Kunsthalle again. So we really wanted to look at at this idea of experimenting with formats and thinking new institutions and how far you can go with that, how adventureness, and then also thinking of the backlash. But then also this one was from this year, Descent Needs a Home for Chiva, which is a museum in Brussels for public space, architecture in art in public space. They are in this process of transformation. They had a show called Institutional Building, in a process of transformation, because they're going to merge with other institutions into Canal Pompidou. Talking about this, one of the worst names in the world, Canal Pompidou. Humble opinion, but yeah, you invent a new institution, it's not so often happening, and then you come up with this thing. It's like, it's painful. But yeah, so the idea of the work is that each time we work closer with the very close with the institution, trying to understand their role and much more the potentiality of the institution there. And with these questions to put in motion all this reflection that it's working both within big group of people, but also within the team. And I can show you, maybe, I don't know how to touch this thing. If I can move. It's really like in the stadium, I have to tell you. It's not very sexy to do the machines because you always are full of bruises. Very primitive machines, the cannons. But then, the joy is there and it's there to stay. And it's there to stay also much longer after we do this burst. Because the works, we started with Kunsthalle Gent and then with Académie Schloss Solitude and Chiva. Decided, talking with them, they decided to keep the works like 3 or 4 years, the work in some special containers in the lobby or in another place. So the questions are there for a long time to be there. Also the questions are taught like that. It's not just for the explosion, for the burst, but then also intercirculate also in some envelopes. So it's a conversation that carries on, like continues within the institution for a long time. Okay, I show you some other things quickly. Okay, I show you now very quickly. I don't know how we are with the time. I try to be fast, but then. Cool. It's a lot. I can do many things in 10 minutes. Okay, so I want maybe I'll show you quickly two things that we did as a way to. It's amazing to be in museums, I have to tell you, in institutions and everything. But then we kept feeling this need to go outside and to meet, to go to and to have encounters with people that don't necessarily go to museums, or they're afraid of art or whatever reason, or maybe they don't feel they belong, or whatever reason. And these are two of the works. One of them is also the burst, because usually we do it in a public space, so lots of people that don't necessarily enter the museum are there. But in this case, it's another. I want to give you two examples from our works in terms of expanding the reach maybe of the institution, because we always want to work with an institution to have this structure, but then also to expand it well into the city. So one of our dreams these days is to have a solo show that is only in the city, nothing to show there, but then only to expand somewhere and to reach people that don't necessarily go. So this one, it's about a sculpture that you see here. It's in Museum. The how do you say, leather flag with 3 poles. It's called, when it's a sculpture, it's called Infinite Contradictions. When it's a performance piece, it's called the Elastic Test. And the idea of the sculpture is to, because these 3 flags are joined, it's a lot about multiplicity and divergent perspectives being, in a way, in the same time, in the same place. So it's about, in a way, us and the other, if you want to say that, but the other is not an opposite of you, but it's an extension of you, because we are all connected. So this idea of trying to think, to be around, 3 people, it comes from our experience as a collective of 3. We are all very different, but then this idea of trying to sort paradoxes and things that are sometimes at the level of society, maybe they look impossible to sort. And then the idea of the flag is that we have a few rules. One of them is that the people carrying the flag, they are not allowed to speak to each other. So it's always a silent, silent negotiation. And then they have to do things, they can do whatever they want with the flag, to move, to turn, to stop, they can do many things. And everything has to be in silence. And also they have to take turning around to whom is leading. And in the beginning, you think, okay, how much can you do with a flag of 3 people? But then it's just amazing, about 10 minutes of doing this, there's a threshold, and then people become very, very creative about it, how they negotiate and what kind of things they are doing. It's just incredible. I'm just showing a couple of things. And usually, it's what that was surprising for us, because we thought, okay, maybe some people will do for some minutes, but sometimes it takes 2 hours or 1 hour and a half or 1 hour. Usually, it's like 40 minutes, and then someone is giving up, and then someone else is speaking. And usually, we do these rounds of, we have every 2.5 hours we start again. In a day, 3 or 4 times. So this is how it works. And it's just incredible as a way of communicating with someone that is foreign, that you don't know, foreign, like unknown for you, usually. And to do that without speaking and to find it's just incredible the way they communicate and the way they do, the things they do with the flag. And then, And then one thing that that was very Norway bound, but then it didn't happen for the Momentum Biennial. And also with the pandemic, it became much more complicated to do, but we dream to do it again. This is it's called the Continuum Broadcast, and it's our work, but then also we have 2 contributions from Simona Asensio and Irina Bujor. And it's a radio installation. In a series where we try to look at the heritage of radio as a tool to inform and entertain, but also to manipulate or empower. Depends how you look at it. For us, it was very important as someone, we grew up in a communist country where radio was very important to understand what was going on beyond the Iron Curtain. For our parents, for us, we were kids, but still we knew about radio, and it was illegal to listen to Voice of America or BBC or Free Europe. And then So we still listen a lot of radio. And we wanted to look at radio to see how we can use voices and sounds and narratives to build contours of things that don't exist. And in this case, the second radio, the first one was about war and post-war feelings. It looked very different. And the second radio is called the Continuum Broadcast. And it's about queer love and love from queer and let's say post-human perspectives. And there are now 5 channels. They're very different formats. Everything is written and recorded by us. I don't tell you too much now about it, but I'll tell you more about how we wanted this work to circulate in the world, because it's very important. The first radio was in very nice exhibitions in different places, and the people went through them to the shows and whatever. But then for this radio, since the topic is much more intimate, and we really wanted the people to sort of give it the time, which usually you don't have 1 hour and something in an exhibition to stay only with one work, to sit with one work. So we decided to present this in association with some institutions, to present it as a free public service, to go to people's home, and it's a listening session and a conversation. Usually it's 2 hours, where we go to people's home. And we did this again, first time with Kunsthalle Ghent, in Ghent and Brussels. It was just amazing to the places we ended up going and the reasons why people invited us, because some people understood the topics, they were interested in the topics of, let's say, queer topics, whatever, but other people invited us because they thought it's funny to have some artists in their home. Other people were interested in radio, idea of radio. Other people were interested because we are from Eastern Europe, so they were curious what some Eastern Europeans were doing there. So, you know, many different reasons. We ended up going to like 40-something homes in 2 weeks and 2 weeks, so in a month. And we ate a lot, and we had only one sort of mini incident. Usually, this was in Kask. They asked us also to go for some students. But it was extremely touching, this idea that also for us it was important that since the topic is much more sensitive, maybe in an exhibition space, someone that is maybe not so, maybe is close to the subject, but maybe not so outspoken about it, they wouldn't get close to the work. So, you know, we wanted to be with the work in a place that is safe for the audience, it's a safe place for them to get closer to this. And then the conversations, because the works, the shows are quite emotional and intense, and the conversations we had were like extremely touching. And also for the people that didn't understand what the subject was when they invited us, we had like some extremely, you know, I don't know, emotional reactions, extremely touching emotional reactions for the work. And we dream to go back. Of course, it's a bit insane. The radio is super heavy. And then just going from, you know, we went like for 4 places in a day. So 2 hours and the places in between, running from, it was a huge commitment, but it's the most, in a way, touching experience we ever had with art. So we really dream to carry on this thing. Okay. And then, is the last one, I think. We have a mini homework for you, if you want, just as a reflection. For tomorrow, if you have time to do a mini round, short round, I don't know, Marianne will tell us if this is realistic or not. But the questions are this: if you can prepare and reflect about these questions, if you can mention 1 or 2 names that are perfect match with the institution. Because it's not about having a quirky name or whatever, but it has to, in a way, to function with that place, or you know what they want to represent. And then also this question that we talked with Marianne in a few months ago here, or maybe 2 months ago, here in Trondheim. What is the most experimental art institution you came across? Maybe to see, you know, how. Okay. Also, if you could wish one thing for your museum, what would that be? Because we heard many wishes, but then maybe it's good to focus on one. And what could that be the most, you know, burning wish that you have for the museum, so that, you know, we can see, a bit of how do you say? It's not prioritizing, let's say. And this last one, I think it's also very important, because I think there is a lot of potential in this one too. In which aspect of institution building, reshaping would you involve artists? Because of course you involve artists so much, you exhibitions and performances and things, but there are so many other places where we think artists could have maybe, as also Sebastian was telling about this placement group, but in this case in the institution, let's say. So these are if you want to reflect on some of this, and it would be nice maybe tomorrow to go a short round to see what kind of opinions you have. And then last question, and it's over. Yeah. Yeah, it's a sort of mirror on the wall situation. We have to be honest, and then we see. This is all for the moment from us. If you have questions or, yeah.
Does anybody have questions? We can also, we're going to be with you tomorrow as well, so we can also, if you want to let it sink and have questions again tomorrow, that's nice. We also have more questions. Yeah.
What was the content of the recordings that you were playing on this radio?
Well, we can give you a secret link to listen to that. But mainly, like one of the shows, for example, it's about new pleasures we found in pandemic time, like small things that saved us. And one of them is about, it's called Cherimoya Pleasure Dome. So it's about eating this fruit of cherimoya, which is extremely sensual, or about cats in drag, or about fandom, like the comments of how do you say, of fans in music videos, and we looked only at the queer music videos, and it's just incredible the sort of overflow of generosity and how much optimism and generosity you can find in those comments. This was one of the shows about new pleasures. One of them, it's about, it's a Q&A, it's called, something with the grid now, I don't remember. It's about, how we have to break definitions, this idea of classifications when we go about, talking about gender, and then, and love and queerness. Another one, which is done by Irina Bujor, it's a show with a soprano, and it talks about transgender communities through wishes that the soprano is singing. So it looks a bit at opera, but then with a very subversive touch about the subject of the show. Another one from Simona Asensio, it's an erotic sort of walk through the city. It's a bit like cruising. It's nothing explicit, but I have to tell you, in the room with people that you don't know, there is a tension thinking that erotic things are said without being very explicit. It's very nice. And then another one, it's about, another one, it's about an artificial intelligence falling in love with two musicians because of a song. This artificial intelligence trying to find love and to understand love. And of course, it's a very complicated thing to do. And then hearing a song that Atletica Ideal, this is the name of that artificial intelligence, falls in love with Roisin Murphy and Maurice Fulton in the same time. Because of, and then many things are sorted. Yeah, and then I think there's one more, but I'm like, yeah. That's it, yeah. One more in the works. Yeah.
Just like one question about the background for working with institutions. I mean, why are you interested in working with institutions and like reshaping them and rethinking about them? What is it about it?
Well, it's talking about, I think it has to do also a bit with something that Sebastian showed us a bit earlier in the first session, about this person that, and how change is happening. We are just three people trying to do hopefully some good things and some cracks in the way things are working around us. And then working with institutions, it's like an extra step that we can do to sort of have an impact with some of these ideas, because otherwise, we just get lost somewhere. So working with institutions, sometimes it's slow, but then also it's extremely exciting, and then it has an impact for many more people, which is impossible to just do for ourselves. We are coming from Romania. We know the limitations of that in many ways, so we have to be a bit more, I don't like strategic, but because we are not at all, we are just like very chaotic in a way. But yeah, we have to think of ways. Also, we started making art also around 30s. So it was a slow process of getting into this. We did many other things before, and then all these things collided, and then it made sense to start this. We started this collective in 2011 after being in Jaspis, where we stopped something and we started the collective. And then for us, it was always, when you arrive to do the best thing you feel this is the best thing you can do, you just push acceleration. And that means you try to look at all the means that could help, this acceleration process happening, and institutions, and working with institutions, and being able to maybe put some seeds for change there. It's one of the ways.
So did you find like any common denominators for the institutions and the processes that you've actually completed?
Mm-hmm.
Are there some aspects of working like that is like coming back every time?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, I think people, the thing is, I think people that are already, we reach out or they reach out, usually they reach out. They're already curious and, semi-ready, not necessarily ready, because it's always very complex to work with a team. If someone is ready in the team, or curator or director, is different than having the entire team ready for that. It's very different, but then I think this semi-readiness that is can be good and bad in the same time. It can. You have to be very, very subtle with the things, and you have to be very careful because change cannot be pushed too much sometimes, and then. I think also this idea that we are within an institution, sometimes because you have to do so many things, you become a bit myopic about certain aspects around you, and it's good to have someone from outside to to maybe show you and to put or to put a mirror in front of the face of this institution, and I don't know. It's complicated. It's complicated. This is common for sure. It's very complicated sometimes, but this is the exciting thing also, because if it would be easy, we would get bored maybe. We like complicated, intricate things, sophistication a bit in the process. Even sometimes it comes out looking simple, but then it's a list of,
Thank you. Yeah, so I think that concludes this day. Thank you. So thank you everybody for today. We continue tomorrow at 9 for a short session, then from the institutional perspective.